All right, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. He's attorney John Clarke, and he was very much involved in, as a representative of somebody who's passed away, Patrick Knowlton, who's involved in the Vince Foster case and has done tons of work, has his website right here on YouTube. People can check it out at FBIcover-up.com. But he's going to talk more about that case. So, John Clarke, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you for having us on. And I say us, it's going to be me and joined by Hugh Turley in a while.
Right. And Hugh and I have done two shows together. We covered the investigation into Thomas Merton, and also he was involved with DC Dave on another book about Vince Foster. So a lot of people have done work. I also did another interview about the Vince Foster called Hillary and Vince. So it was kind of a different kind of approach on that. But can you talk, for people who don't know your background, can you talk about how you got involved in the suspicious death of Vince Foster?
Yes, an acquaintance and friend of mine was Patrick Knowlton, and we live in the same apartment building. And that's how I got to know Patrick. I knew him, fairly well just from interaction with the building. A nice guy. And then he called me and said that he had been subpoenaed and harassed to testify before the Whitewater grand jury. So I missed his first call, and then on Friday, this was in 1995, in October of 1995, he was subpoenaed on a Thursday. On a Friday evening, I finally got back to him and went to visit him in his apartment building. And he told me this kind of the short story about what had happened to him. He was in Fort Marcy Park, and nobody really paid much attention to what he had to say until what turned out to be the second FBI investigation. And like I said, he was subpoenaed and harassed. And so in his apartment at the time was Ambrose Evan Pritchard and Patrick Knowlton. So Patrick told me the story. So my first reaction was, well, why don't you call the Washington Post? And Ambrose rolled his eyes. He said, "That's," he just rolled his eyes because I was sort of a pretty green pretty green when it comes to this, with the news media. So, William, I was hoping that we could play that video. Let's talk a little bit about who Vince Foster was, and then we play the video. It's got a really good background, and your viewers will get an opportunity to meet Patrick Knowlton because he's featured, of course, in the video. And he really does an excellent job at describing the intimidation and harassment that he suffered beginning the same day that he was subpoenaed to testify before the Whitewater grand jury. And of course, grand jury subpoenas, grand jury testimony is all secret. Nobody knew that Patrick had been subpoenaed except for the Office of Independent Counsel and the FBI. So, sorry.
Would you like me to play this video that you're seeing right here, the Vince Foster cover-up?
I would, but
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about, because a lot of your listeners may not be aware of who Vince Foster was. He was a deputy White House counsel under Bill Clinton during the first term, and he died in July of 1993. So that's 6 months into the first Bill Clinton, Bill Clinton term. So, and he was found in Fort Marcy Park with apparently a gun in his hand, and it was quickly ruled a suicide. Now, for those of people who have lived through this, they probably remember being told over and over again by the news media that it was a simple suicide, that it was a suicide. And they also have been told that there have been 5 separate investigations. Now, we're going to go into that. There have not been 5. There's been one long investigation by the FBI under different titles, the Park Police and 2 independent counsels, and Congress never looked into the death, but we'll look into that too. Although the news media has told you that Congress has looked into it, they haven't. So let me, again, this is the highest ranking official to die under suspicious circumstances since the murder of JFK, and nobody knows anything about it. And one of the primary players in this cover-up was Brett Kavanaugh. And I'm going to prove that to you and to your listeners. And that's why I'm so happy that we can have a nice long show for 2 hours probably, because I can't prove to you and your listeners that Vince Foster was murdered and that Brett Kavanaugh played a significant role in covering it up without this amount of time. So again, I think now that we know who Vince Foster was, let's play the video. It's 28 minutes, but it's really very, very telling and very well done by way of telling the background of this case.
And for people who don't know, Brett Kavanaugh was one of the researchers for the Starr Report. So he interviewed a lot of different people.
Yes, he was his predecessor is named Miguel Rodriguez, and Miguel Rodriguez was not going to go along with the cover-up, so he was forced out. And so Starr replaced Miguel Rodriguez with Brett Kavanaugh. He was the head. He was heading up that particular inquiry under the auspices of the Office of Kenneth Starr's Office of Independent Counsel. And I have been over the years. I occasionally give people notice and give them the proof of this murder cover-up. And let me just read you a couple of sentences from my most recent one, which was last year, January 6th of 2020. And this was to 5 members of Congress and 2 alternate reporters, not mainstream reporters. United States Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh played a significant role in covering up the 1993 murder of Deputy White House Counsel Vincent W. Foster. The proof of this accusation appears in the record in 2 courts, the Special Division of the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit and the United States Supreme Court. The proof also appears in taped interviews and memoranda of U.S. Attorney Miguel Rodriguez, who served as Kenneth Starr's prosecutor in the Foster death probe from March 1994 until his resignation in December of 1995. Rodriguez refused to participate in the FBI's murder cover-up. Starr replaced Rodriguez with Kavanaugh. So again, as I said, I'm very happy that we can do this show and that you were nice enough to give me enough time to prove it to all of your listeners exactly the truth. And I'm going to prove to you that it was a murder cover-up covered up by, among others, Brett Kavanaugh.
Gotcha. Shall I roll it? Roll tape?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, let's do it. Do you hear the audio?
I do not.
Say that again. Do you hear the audio or not?
I do not hear the audio.
Okay, let me try it this way then. Let me take these things off.
People that have been drawn into questioning the Foster case.
Can you hear it now?
Yes.
Or the Washington Post, the Washington Times may not be looking at the best evidence. The best evidence hasn't been reported. And people like Patrick Knowlton, his story hasn't been told.
On July 20th, 1993, I stopped into Fort Marcy Park at 4:30 p.m. in the afternoon. As soon as I pulled up into the lot, it's a driveway, I think it's about 0.2 of a mile long. The first thing I saw when I pulled up was this rust brown square-backed vehicle with an Arkansas license plate.
Patrick was on his way home from working a construction job in suburban Maryland, backed up in traffic, and he had to urinate. So he pulled into Fort Marcy Park to do that, and it was 4:30 p.m. That's Tuesday, July 20th. And he didn't know it, of course, at the time, but Vince Foster was dead at the time that Patrick pulled into the park. Patrick is a witness that could open up a very large can of worms. There are a lot of people who would just as soon see him no longer exist.
As I got up into where the actual level of the parking area was, I looked to my right, and there was a car parked there, a blue car. It was backed in. Because of the way the leaves were hitting the windshield, I couldn't tell if anybody was in either car at first. I just pulled up and I pulled into the right-hand side of this brown car. And as I put my car in park, I looked to the right, and the passenger window of this car that was backed in just came down. And there was this Hispanic or Middle Eastern, I wasn't really sure of his nationality, but there was this man. He just gave me this look.
Pat got out of his car and started to walk into the Fort Marcy Park to find the first large tree. And as he did, he heard this guy who was parked open his car door. So Pat was a little bit nervous, and he looked at this sign bordering Fort Marcy Park.
And then I just looked over my shoulder to the right, and I saw this guy. He just was leaning on his car and just staring at my head. Nothing else, just staring directly at my face. So I walked up this very wide path, and I went to the left. Now, I didn't know that Vince Foster's body was to the right at the time.
As he was on his way back, he heard the car door close, this man's car door. So he didn't know whether or not maybe the guy could be coming after him or if he'd gotten back in his car.
So I became very cautious, and as I approached the landing where you can see into the parking lot, I saw the brown Honda, my car, and I saw the blue car, and I didn't see this guy anywhere. So I thought, well, geez, maybe he's crouched down between the cars, or because he acted so strange, I was just suspicious of the guy. So I walked right towards the door, the driver's side of the brown Honda, using that as like a buffer, because I figured, just a little shield.
And he just happened to remember that the car was brown, and that it was an older brown Arkansas car. So as it turned out, that was pretty significant, because Mr. Foster's car was a silver car.
And as I cautiously walked on the back of the car, I looked and I saw that there was nobody crouched there. So I just had my keys in my hand. I just unlocked my door, got in the car, closed the door, and locked my door with my elbow. And I look over, and down comes the window again. And this guy just looks out at me. So I just start my car, and I back out, and I leave.
Patrick's account of what happened to him at the park is very important, because we know from the forensic evidence that Vincent Foster was dead by 4:30 when Patrick pulled into Fort Marcy Park. There were only 2 cars in the lot, neither of which belonged to Vincent Foster. So that's pretty important information. It just shoots the suicide in the park theory completely to shreds.
Patrick Knowlton is a crucial and pivotal witness in this case, and he was important to the authorities because at the very beginning, he did not see Mr. Foster's car at the park, and it was important for them to establish that he did.
This is CNN's Prime News.
The top stories this hour. In an apparent suicide, White House lawyer Vince Foster was found dead last night. President Clinton.
So I turn the TV on, and I kick back, and 11 o'clock news comes on. The first thing on the news is, yesterday Vince Foster's body was found in Fort Marcy Park, and his body was discovered at 6 o'clock. And I was like, wow, I was there at 4:30, and his car was there. I saw this guy's car. This is what I'm thinking to myself, this White House guy.
So Patrick called the U.S. Park Police and reported what he had seen. And that was it. I mean, nobody came to see him, and he just reported what he had seen over the telephone. And then it was in April of 1994, so this is 9 months after Mr. Foster's death, that Patrick was contacted and interviewed by 2 FBI agents, Larry Monroe and William Columbell.
And towards the last 45 minutes of the interview, he opened his desk, and he pulled out some photographs. And I could tell they were Polaroids. And they were upside down, and he was sort of shuffling them as he talked to me. And I kept looking down to see what he was shuffling. And he said, no, I want to talk about this car again.
And what they tried to do was they tried to get Patrick to admit that the car that he saw in the park could have been Mr. Foster's newer 1989 silver gray Honda, and it wasn't. It was the car that Patrick saw was a brown car.
And then he starts flipping them all over, and he's saying to me, "Are you sure? Are you positive this is not the car you saw at the Arkansas license plate? Couldn't this have been the car? This could have been the car. Couldn't it have been?" He kept using all that terminology. He wanted me to say, "Well, it could have been." But I kept saying, "No, that wasn't the car of the Arkansas license plates. The car of the Arkansas license plate was older and brown and looked nothing like this car." And I said, "Is that Mr. Foster's car?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know, Mr. Knowlton. Didn't you see Mr. Foster's car?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, what did Mr. Foster's car look like?" And I said, "It was a brown, older car." And that's when I made the statement. It didn't look like a car an attorney would drive from, in my vision.
A lot of people, I think, could have been frightened away. Or would have just rolled over and said, yes, that may have been the car I saw. And that's all the FBI wanted them to say, was that it might have been, could have been a gray Honda, 1989. And most people might have just gone on with their lives, and the FBI would have been happy and satisfied that Foster's car was there at 4:30. That didn't happen.
And finally I just said, I'm not going to change my story. this is what I saw. This is not the car I saw. And, that's all I can say about it.
And then 18 months after that, so now we're talking 27 months after the death, in October of 1995, Patrick was contacted and interviewed by Ambrose Evans Pritchard.
And I started telling him the story, and I was into about 5 minutes of it, and he interrupted me and said, "Are you telling me the truth?"
Ambrose was, at the time, the Washington, D.C. bureau chief for the London Sunday Telegraph.
And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm telling you the truth." He says, "Well, have you ever read your statements that that when you gave them to the FBI?" And I said, "No."
When the FBI interviews you, it's just an interview report. It's not like a witness statement. The witness doesn't get to see it or initial it or sign it or anything like that.
I sat down in a chair in his office, and he handed me some papers that said FBI on top, and I started reading it. And I realized that I'm reading my stuff, my statements that are now typed up. I knew they were handwritten notes. Now it's typed up, and I'm reading it, and I'm saying, "Well, I didn't say that. And that's not true." And I'm saying this stuff out loud.
And an article appeared in the London Telegraph on Sunday, the 22nd of October, 1995, saying that Patrick was stunned when he saw these FBI interview reports, and that they contained outright lies.
But on the 21st, Ambrose called me on the phone and said, "I'm doing an article for the newspaper, and I'm afraid it might jeopardize your life, possibly."
Now, that article appeared in U.S. newsstands on Tuesday, October 24th, 1995.
So this article comes out, and then, of course, on Tuesday, we get on the newsstand and pay the $6.95 for the Sunday Telegraph and open it up, and there is my name in print, which is the first time I've ever seen anything like it, and this story about how I said the FBI lied, how Ken Starr never called me before his grand jury, or Ken Starr never interviewed me. And the picture of the guy that I saw in the park, Ambrose said, "Could this be the murder?" It was a picture of Hillary and Vince Foster and my name. And I'm just like, it was sort of surreal. And I was like, why would the guy write a story like this? But as I read the story, it was all true. Once I was able to accept that, it was a newspaper article that was in another country, then I wasn't so worried about that. Well, who's going to see this, And lo and behold, Ken Starr and his crew, obviously were monitoring Ambrose Evans Pritchard's articles.
That day, the Office of Independent Counsel, Mr. Starr's office, prepared a subpoena for Patrick to testify before the Whitewater grand jury the following week, Wednesday, November 1st.
The person who served me the subpoena was Russell Bransford, who was an FBI agent who had worked for Robert Fisk, worked for Ken Starr, and possibly was involved in the 16-day police investigation, the initial investigation. I'm not sure of that, but I think I'd guess I would say it probably was.
This was, of course, a secret subpoena. These grand jury proceedings are secret. No one knows about them except for the FBI and the Office of Independent Counsel. So Patrick received his subpoena on Thursday mornings, a little after 10 a.m. From Agent Bransford, Russell Bransford. And Bransford gave Patrick his business card and said, "If you have any problems, give me a call." So beginning that same day, Patrick was harassed on the streets of Washington.
On October 26, 1995, after I served the subpoena by Russell Bransford, I called my girlfriend on the phone and I complained to her about being subpoenaed. And I was, pretty overwhelmed by that. I just thought, this is so ridiculous. What do they want me for, Catherine and I were walking down to DuPont Circle, and we were crossing this intersection of New Hampshire Avenue and 20th Street. And I look up, there's a guy about 20 feet away, maybe, and he's just got his face locked right on my head. I mean, his eyes are locked on my head. And I look up and I look back down, and we get closer. I look up, he's still staring right at me. This is very blank, cold-looking stare. Not blinking his eyes, not squinting, just like staring. And as he walks past us, he turns his head and continues to stare at me. And I look, while I'm watching him, he just keeps walking and staring at me. So we stop in the middle of the block. And we look back, and the guy was standing on the corner. He still looked back, still looking back at me, and he raised his wrist and he talked into his shirt sleeve. So we turn, we start walking down the sidewalk, and as soon as we start walking, there's a guy walking directly toward me. Now he's doing the same thing. Expressionless but cold kind of look, just staring right at my head. At about this point here, the man cut to my left. He walked by me. We stopped to get in the road, the sidewalk, and we turned back to look, and this guy crossed over the street, and the other guy, the first guy we ran into, was at the first corner waiting for the light to change, is what we thought. They both been on that corner. They exchanged some words, and then they walked on. Now, DuPont Circle, and I don't know if I should be saying this or not because I don't want to make any kind of disparaging remarks, but it's a gay community of Washington. And I said to Catherine, geez, I must look pretty good tonight. And that was just a little joke that, these guys are staring at me. Maybe I look good tonight. So we sort of laugh. And as we turn again to start walking, a guy comes. I don't even know where this guy, actually, I don't even know where this guy, if he was standing behind a pole or what he was standing on a pillar. This guy just comes out of nowhere and walks on my right-hand side and just glares at my face. So this guy's looking a little bit angrier than anybody else was. He walked onto my right-hand side and brushed my shoulder as he walked by. And again, this gentleman had his locked-eyed stare on me. And as he walked by me, he just turned his face and continued to stare at me as he walked by. The fifth guy, again, followed us down to the street corner. And as we approached the street corner on our street, there was the sixth guy standing there. The sixth guy was another big guy. He was sort of standing at ease as we approached the corner. And this is when I thought, well, and there's hardly anybody on the street, by the way. It's not very crowded. And I'm thinking to myself, now this is getting a little peculiar. Now I realize that these people really are staring at me. It's not my imagination. And as we approach the corner, this guy is like standing in an at ease position, and he sort of swings himself around in like a military stance as we reach the corner. And he's just like staring down at me, and I look over at him. He's a 6'6" guy, and he's like staring down at me. And I said to Catherine, let's cross the street.
Most of these men were approaching Patrick and following him and staring at him before his predecessor had stopped. So it's back to back to back to back. Very, very strange. So we talked to, eventually, I talked to a number of experts who are familiar with this technique of intimidation. And what they said was, well, yeah, they're familiar with it. It's used by federal intelligence and investigative agencies. And what it does is it has two objects, two purposes. Number one, it warns the witnesses and scares the witnesses and intimidates the witness. And if that doesn't work and the witness continues to tell the truth about whatever it is that they've seen, it will discredit him. I mean, who's going to believe somebody who says that every time he leaves his building, there are strange men on every street corner following him and staring at him? And particularly from a witness who said that back on July 20th of 1993, there was a man in the parking lot who was staring at him. I mean, it just sounds like a nut.
The guy was right on my tail. He's right behind me. So then we started walking a little quicker. We started picking up our pace a little bit because I'm nervous. Now I know something's going on and I'm feeling very uptight. And so we start crossing the street. This guy starts walking right behind me. I mean, like right on my heels. And now my heart's starting to pump a little bit. And I'm feeling a little nervous. And I turn around and this guy is like, I'm not kidding. He's like leaning over me as we're walking. And I'm picking up our pace. Now Catherine's getting very upset. She's holding on to me tighter and tighter. And on our left-hand side, there's just another guy pacing back and forth as we're approaching. My heart's racing. My legs are feeling rubbery. I'm actually getting pretty sick to my stomach. Catherine gets very upset. I grabbed Catherine, and we ran across Connecticut Avenue, which is a very busy street. It was like a scene out of a movie. I mean, it was just unbelievable. We get in the median strip, and I think, okay, now we're going to get across the street. All the bad guys are behind us, wherever they are. Now, Catherine is starting to get a little weepy. She's getting very upset because it becomes very real. And as we get ready to cross the street where there's no cars coming, I see in the corner another guy standing there, and he's just staring at me. And I'm thinking, this is impossible. How can they be all over the place here? This is not real. And I realize at this point, this road is getting dark. It's too dark. There's no street lights. And I'm just like, this is not good. Let's not go down there. I said to Catherine, let's not go down there. So as I turn around to start heading back, the guy who crossed the street was right here behind us, and was right on top of us. And I started to panic. Now, Catherine, of course, was holding back tears. So I turn around, and as we turn around to walk back, he turns around and walks right next to Catherine and maintains the same pace walking that we are. We slow down, he slows down. We speed up, he speeds up. The whole time we're walking, this guy's just looking over. Look at this Catherine, 5'5", and he's looking over her head and just staring at me the whole time we're walking. So finally, we just started running. I didn't care about traffic like I don't right now. I just went right across the street. a car comes up on the left-hand side of us and sort of paces our walk. Now, at that point, I mean, not only are my legs rubbery back at number 7, 8, and 9, but my stomach, I mean, I'm feeling euphoric. I mean, I really am at this time, and this may sound insane to some people, but I feel like my soul's leaving my body. Now, as we get about to this point, the guy walks around in the back of his car. Now, there's no vehicles parked here. It's just his is parked in the middle. I see him go to the back of his car, and he opens his trunk up, and he pulls something out of his trunk. And I sort of hesitate, because I'm thinking, again, this guy's got a gun. And the whole time he's in his trunk, he's turning back and he's looking at us. He's watching us standing where we are. Nothing felt safe. That's one thing about this this harassment. It really hits you deep. You end up questioning yourself. And that's what it is. You end up questioning yourself, and that loses your confidence. I realized that's the technique they used, was to make you question yourself, your own sanity, in a very short period of time.
It's terrifying. It's like something out of the Twilight Zone or Alfred Hitchcock. It's really scary. You know, a lot of the movies we see today, they always have like these terrorists are the bad guys, the FBI are the good guys that save us. If you ever turn that upside down, you can think of a more horrifying movie than if the FBI agents were evil and they were terrorizing the citizens and the press was going along with it. It's scary.
Finally, after being harassed Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I didn't go anywhere on Sunday. On Monday, this has gone for 4 days now, Russell Bransford finally calls me on the phone at 10 o'clock and he says, "Oh, I heard you had a little trouble over the weekend. You want to tell me about it?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." I said, "We called you. We called Ken Starr's office. Nobody responded." He had nothing to say about that. He said, "Well, let's come over and talk to you right now." And I said, "No, if I'm going to talk to you, I want to have my attorney present." "Well, you don't need an attorney to talk to me."
It wasn't until much later, at least, maybe a week or so later, that we were, trying to figure out what was going on. And I really couldn't figure it out. I could not figure it out because I thought that this is not part of a cover-up. I just thought that's just too incredible. That there would be a cover-up of Vince Foster's death, because I knew that the Park Police had investigated it. I thought that the Congress had investigated it, and it was being investigated by Ken Starr's office, and Ken Starr certainly has a stellar reputation by way of integrity. So I thought, well, it just can't be a cover-up.
Hung the phone up. I went to look for John's telephone number, and I had his card for his office. I got his card, found his number, picked up my phone. There was no dial tone. My phone was as dead. I was like, "What is?" So I went to my other phone, picked it up, and it was completely dead. Ding dong. My phone, my doorbell rings. So I'm thinking, oh, maybe it's John, because I left a message at one point for him. And I go to the door, open the door, and there's the FBI agent. I said, "What are you doing up here?" He goes, "Well, I was just in the neighborhood." And I said, "Well, wherever you called me from, did you hang the phone up?" I said, "My phone's not working." So he walks right into my apartment, and he goes over to my phone and picks it up. And I never really thought about it. He'd know exactly where my phone was. Goes over, picks up my phone, and, "Oh, that's dead, all right. That's dead." And he went over to my other phone, picked it up. "Oh, yeah, that's dead. If we had anything to do with this, you'd never know it. If we were tapping your lines or anything like that, you would never know it." And he hangs the phone up, and he unbuttons his coat. He throws his coat open, and I see his sidearm, and he sits down, and he says, like this kind of thing. He says, "Tell me about this problem you had over the weekend."
Among other things, the American people have been told is that 3 separate entities have investigated this case, or 4 separate entities if you include Congress. They say, well, first the Park Police concluded suicide in the park, and then the Fisk probe concluded suicide in the park, and then the Starr probe concluded suicide in the park. Well, what they're missing is the common denominator in all 3 of those investigations, and that is the FBI.
And all the time I'm telling him the story, he's just sitting there smiling at me. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm telling him a story that scared the life out of me, and he's staring at me. And I finally just stopped telling him the story. After, I'm serious, 40 minutes I talked to this guy. And I finally said to him, "What's your deal? What are you smiling about?" He said, "Well, I'm going to tell you this, Mr. Knowlton. That article that was in the newspaper, I've worked with Larry Monroe and William Collin. I worked with them in the Fisk investigation, and I'm working with them in the Starr investigation." And I said, "Well, then, Officer Agent Bransford, can I trust you? Can I be trusting you?" And he leaned right over into my face and said, "Mr. Knowlton, I don't know. That's a very good question.
As to why it is that the press won't cover it, I don't know. I really don't understand it. In fact, I didn't believe that they wouldn't cover it. I thought that eventually they would if I just gave them enough evidence of what it was that was going on. But then it finally sort of dawned on me, and I sort of learned the hard way that they're not going to cover it no matter what it is that we give to them. And when I learned that was on October 10th. Of 1997. That was when Ken Starr's report was released. And it was released with 20 pages, which I authored, which the 3-judge panel ordered Mr. Starr to attach over his objection to his own report. Now, in that 20 pages, it's an 11-page letter and then excerpts from 25 federal government records proving 5 separate points of a cover-up. Now, this is the first time in the history of the independent counsel statute that an independent counsel was ordered to attach evidence of a cover-up by his own investigators to his own report. Now, if they're not going to recover that, there's pretty much that sort of says it all. I feel like I could have a video of the body being dragged through the park, and they wouldn't cover that.
And at this point, the American press has a vested interest in not reporting this story, not telling the public about Patrick Knowlton. Whether courts rule in his favor or against him, they're not going to tell the public. They don't want the public to know about Patrick Knowlton or what he saw at Fort Marcy Park. The press at this point will look bad.
Now, if the truth surfaces, their credibility is going to take a very, very major hit. They have been reporting suicide in the park, no foul play, for the last 6.5 years, beginning before the first official investigation was even closed.
It took me a long time to realize that the perpetrators, it's so sloppy, and there's so much evidence laying around for someone. If you go out and pick it up and look at it, there's so much evidence of this cover-up. It's all over the place. And I think you can only be that sloppy and leave that much evidence out there if you have confidence that the press is not going to report it.
When you start to get into the case, you find that every single point in the Office of Independent Counsel's report on the Vince Foster case, I mean, every one of them is untrue. There's not one single point that the Starr report makes that can withstand scrutiny when compared with the underlying federal investigative record in the case.
Whether or not Mr. Foster was depressed is really not relevant, because the physical evidence of the case shows that the man did not take his own life. The blood on his shoulder and the fact that his car wasn't at the park and so many other things that whether or not he was depressed or not really doesn't matter. Depressed people can be killed.
If you prove cover-up in this case, you prove some other things that are really much more important, very important for, I think, all of us to know. Because if you prove cover-up, you prove not only that there's government corruption, but the Office of Independent Counsel, Mr. Starr's office, and now Mr. Wray's office, is infected with the very corruption that is designed to expose and prosecute. It also proves that we can't rely on the Congress to exercise oversight over the executive. And that's something that we all, sort of take for granted. And also, it tells us, I think probably most importantly, and maybe most shockingly, or at least to me, is that we can't rely on the press to report the facts of these cases, even or the existence of cover-ups, even when they're obvious, even when we've already proved them. They're just not going to cover it.
They'll focus all the attention on Monica Lewinsky or some other issue, O.J. Simpson. The public is all looking at all the noise and all the action, or they talk about how the Democrats, Republicans are really going at it, and you got James Carville battling with Ken Starr, and it appears that this is where the real action is, but it's not. It's the big noise in motion covering up the little motion. And when people are looking up here at this hand that's moving, they don't see what my other hand is doing. And that's what the press does. And they do it very well. It's a lot like a wrestling match, too, because it looks like they're fighting. There's a lot of adversarial thing. It looks like there's a liberal media and a conservative media. You got Limbaugh on one side. Did you ever hear Limbaugh talk about Patrick Knowlton?
We rely in this country on our press, our news media, to keep government honest, and they're not doing it. And it's our separate democratic institutions are not functioning as they were intended, as the founding fathers intended. They're supposed to be exercising oversight over one another. They're supposed to be pursuing different interests They're really not. They're really pursuing the same interest, and that is credibility.
Now the whole thing's going to unravel because of Mr. Knowlton. Everything's coming apart because the whole conspiracy to cover up the facts is coming apart, and the role of the press from the very beginning is coming apart.
I'm just an average citizen. All I did was I called the police when I thought that something was wrong. I did what I thought was my civic duty by coming forward and talking to the FBI. I did what I thought was right by going and talking to a journalist. And I also did what I thought was right by going before the grand jury. And all this stuff is just, caved in my little world that I lived in. It's devastating.
Well, what's the lesson that people learn from what Patrick Knowlton did? I think the lesson, or the possible lessons, are that if you know something and it doesn't go along with whatever it is that the FBI wants you to say, change your story and keep your mouth shut.
I've certainly made some enemies by doing what I've done, because I'm dealing with people who are covering up a murder. People who cover up murder are not very nice people. And I don't think about it a lot, but there's some risk involved. But given the choice of uncovering the murder, helping Patrick, and taking that risk, I'd rather do that than just go along. I don't want to go along with murder, and I don't want to go along with lies, and I don't want to go along with the press that's not truthful and just pretend that it's okay. I know too much now to turn around and go back. I couldn't live a life that was false.
We've proved the case. I mean, we haven't even issued one subpoena, and we've already proved cover-up.
It's all documented now. We've pulled all the pieces of the puzzle together and put them in a bound volume. And if it hadn't been for Mr. Knowlton, I don't think the truth would have come out.
All right. So that was it. That was Patrick Knowlton getting gang stalked back in the day by the unknown, others, many people unknown, intimidated. So where do you want to take it from there, John?
Well, very briefly, I wanted to talk about what was the purpose of that harassment, the way that he suffered. Again, he was in Fort Marcy Park reporting that someone who was giving him a cold, hard stare. So how do you discredit something like that? Well, you have it so that every time the witness steps out of his apartment building, there are strange men on every street corner giving him a cold, hard stare. And this, it worked. Let me read you just a couple of things. Now, this is from quoted in Patrick's civil rights lawsuit that he filed. But this is and it's at the website, the amended complaint. It reads like a short story. In any event, this is what the Weekly Standard magazine had to say by an article by Michael Isikoff, who's one of the most valuable players in this murder cover-up. He writes, Evans Pritchard's work, such as it is, consists of little more than wild flights of conspiratorial fancy, coupled with outrageous and wholly uncorroborated allegations, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on. Patrick Knowlton, a construction worker who stopped to urinate at Fort Marcy Park on the afternoon of Foster's death, here's the key part, recalls seeing a mysterious Hispanic-looking man lingering around the parking lot. No sooner has as Evans Pritchard popped this bombshell in the Telegraph than Knowlton reports menacing men in business suits begin following him and staring at him really hard. And then another magazine, also quoted in that paragraph, the amended complaint, is November 25th, 1997, the National Review, written by Jacob Cohn. And he writes that Knowlton consists that very sinister-looking man was hovering around the parking lot and may have monitored his peeing. Knowlton seems to have a penchant for seeing the sinister in the glances of those he meets. Mysterious cars follow him, he says, carefully organized of men constantly pass him and his girlfriend on the street, giving them very menacing stares. So it worked, what it was that they did. We notified Congress. We had personalized letters to 500 and hand-delivered to 535 members of Congress. And one of the recipients, there only got 4 responses. We can go through them a little bit later. But one of the recipients was Dana Rohrbacher, and he met with Patrick and also with with Ambrose Evans Pritchard, and he too is familiar with the technique of harassment that Patrick suffered. He said that when he was in the Reagan administration as a speechwriter, that they employed that technique, that he was aware of their having employed that technique. Now, what I want to do next is to just briefly go through that appendix that you saw that I was referring to in the documentary, the first or the 28 minutes of the documentary that was never finished.
Is that accessible, John? Is it accessible on your website?
Well, is what accessible?
The appendix.
Yes, the appendix is on the website. I have a copy of it right here, and this was ordered to be attached to Ken Starr's, or I should say Brett Kavanaugh's report on the death of Vincent Foster. And it's the only time in the history of the independent counsel statute that an independent counsel was ordered to attach evidence of a cover-up by his own investigators in his own report. And not one news organization covered it in this country. Not one. Kind of amazing. The highest ranking official to die under suspicious circumstances since JFK. Now this, I want to go through some of the exhibits that are in the appendix. I have them blown up here. Let's see, I haven't tried this before, but let's see if I can go through this with you and your listeners, if you can see it. This is, I don't know if you can see this, this is Exhibit 1, and it has Patrick's his experience at Fort Marcy Park for 5 minutes. He walked next to the car. The second car, his first car was not Vince Foster's car. And then down here we have the timeline of everything that has happened. July 20th, he witnesses these events at Fort Marcy Park. April 15th of 1993, the FBI interviews him. And then May 11th of 1995, 1994, he's interviewed again, and they falsified his account. And then in 1895, Ambrose Evans Pritchard notifies him, locates him. It was very difficult to do because they misspelled his name. And then finally, this is a 1 week period where he's subpoenaed and harassed again. The only people that knew that he was subpoenaed was the FBI and Brett Kavanaugh's Office of Independent Counsel. Now here's the Exhibit 2. It's got these numbers of 27 people, or people who harassed him, and it goes through and tells you what it was that he suffered. Now,
didn't you guys have? Sorry to interrupt, John, but didn't you guys have pictures of some of those guys? They were like young guys carrying black satchels.
We found, we have one photograph because Patrick saw him on the street in front of the building where he lived at the time on Pennsylvania Avenue. He said he saw the photograph, and so we have that photograph and we published it. So we have photograph of one. And then this, I'm going to go through the balance of these exhibits. The order attached to Ken Starr's report proving a murder cover-up. Here's a U.S. This shows that he did not own the weapon that was eventually recovered from his hand. And this just kind of proves how the FBI tricked Mrs. Foster. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. Tricked Mrs. Foster into identifying the weapon. The weapon is black that was found in his hand. Here's a picture from ABC News pointing out this black weapon. And then Mr. Foster had a silver weapon. So the FBI, down here's the FBI 302 report showing that they showed Mrs. Foster a silver weapon, and she identified it. And of course, the FBI said that was the weapon that was recovered for his hand. It's an obvious lie. Now, this one, we're showing that Vince Foster was dead by 4:30 when Patrick Knowlton was in the park. We know he had a cheeseburger. We know that about 1 o'clock, we know that the U.S. Park Police report said that he had, the doctor who performed the autopsy said he'd been dead for 2 to 3 hours. So that puts his time of death before 4:30. And here's a paramedics incident report saying essentially the same thing. So he was dead by the time that Patrick Knowlton was in the park. Now this one is interviews with Patrick Knowlton to 2 other civilian witnesses. Patrick Knowlton and the 2 other civilian witnesses testified or told the FBI and the Park Police, to the extent that they asked, that the car was brown. It was not Vince Foster's car. And another interesting thing about those two witnesses is that one of them, or they both said that the car, that this is the car that Kavanaugh says was Vince Foster's car. There was a man seated in it, and the hood was up, and there was another guy standing outside. This you wouldn't know any of that from reading Kavanaugh's report of the death. Next one. Oh, this is the photographs. Here's the photograph. The U.S. Park Police officer who took a whole roll of photographs of the body said they looked good to him, and the FBI said no, they couldn't get anything from them. They were all underexposed. And the next one here is the same thing about the Polaroids. Now only 13 Polaroids exist officially, and then the Polaroids disappear. Here it is. That proves that they're lying about that too. Now the autopsy. We'll go into the autopsy a little bit later, I hope. But this is again part of Kavanaugh's report saying autopsy report. The X-ray which were taken. U.S. Park Police report. The doctor told the Park Police who were attending that the X-ray showed what the X-ray showed. And now down here we got the Fisk report. Says there was no X-rays taken because the X-ray machine was broken. And down at the bottom here we have an affidavit saying that this gentleman, Reed Irvine, founder of Accuracy Media, called up the person who was to check, who serviced the X-ray machine. It wasn't broken. The first, it was brand new, and the first service call was in October. And again, this was in July, so they're lying about that too. And then lastly, this is probably the most important one. This is the fifth exhibit, one of 4 pages. I won't go through the other pages, but this talks about a bullet wound in Mr. Foster's neck. There was a bullet wound in his neck. He was supposed to have pulled the trigger with this high velocity weapon in his mouth. He didn't. It was in his neck, and we have a lot of evidence. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to go through it to prove to your viewers that there was a bullet wound in Mr. Foster's neck. So
this, which document is the one that you sent me right here? Let's see if I can get this off. Which document is this? Is this the edition that you put in there? That's your name on it, right, John H. Clarke?
Yeah, these are some selections of some items that I wanted to go through with you, and they're really very telling. But before I do, let me show you this. Now, this is a 540-page document. It is filed in the here. It's filed in a number of federal courts, but this is filed in the U.S. Supreme Court. So, where of course Brett Kavanaugh is Associate Justice. Now, that's 540 pages. And what it proves, we'll go through some of it. We'll at least go through the table of contents, or at least portions of the table of contents. It's very lengthy. But what it proves is that there's nothing, as I said in that documentary, there's nothing that Kavanaugh wrote in this report that is true. Now, you might say, well, that must be an overstatement. Even if it's a murder cover-up, there's something that's going to be true. No, there isn't. And the reason that there isn't is because Vince Foster's body was not ready for its official cover-up discovery when that 911 call went into Fairfax County. So that's the reason. The body wasn't ready for its discovery. That's the reason that we're in the position that we are in order to prove virtually that there's nothing that's true in Kavanaugh's report. So let's go through. Have you got that file that I sent you?
Yes, I do. I'll pull it right up. This one, right?
Yeah. Now that's the first page. We just saw that. So let's go on to the second page.
Okay.
Now,
second page.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what I wanted to talk about this is that, particularly for the people who lived through this, they again have heard suicide in the park, suicide in the park, suicide in the park. Heard it over and over again, and it was really this is, I think, the longest sustained press leak in U.S. history. suicide. But there are people who say, well, if this was true, number one, somebody would have come forward. Well, the fact is, we don't know how many people have come forward. We know that the prosecutor, Miguel Rodriguez, and we have him on tape at the website, FBICoverup.com, on tape, talking about his interactions with journalists. He was trying his best. He really tried to get the word out. He spoke with over 100 journalists. And this is the prosecutor assigned to the Vince Foster death investigation. 100 journalists, and not one of them printed anything, or not one newspaper. And he talks about that. He said, a lot of these journalists were really quite interested. They went to and he says, again, you can listen to him talking about it. He says that they went to all the trouble of writing these articles, some of which they read to him over the phone, and not one of the editors would let it go to print. Not one. So we don't, like I said, we don't know how many people sought to come forward. We know that that a number of people did, and that it was just it was really news suppression. Now let's go on to the next page.
Sorry. Yeah. Next page.
Yeah.
This is the summary of contents. So you can see all the work that John did on this. There's just tons of pages, 500 pages.
Actually, instead of the summary contents, let's go to the very next page. It's the 4th page. And that's the table of contents. That's not the summary of contents of the summary of contents. That's the actual table of contents. As you can see, it's very lengthy. It's got virtually everything in it. Chapter 4, we talk about that the White House knew about the death before they were officially notified. We prove that. And then the next chapter, 5, we talk about the photographs, some of which we cover here. We showed absolutely proof that the photographs have vanished. The next chapter, chapter 6, is the longest one. Its title is Evidence That the OIC, that stands for Office of Independent Counsel, covered up the absence of the official mouth entrance wound, wasn't there, and the head exit wound, wasn't there, and the existence of a neck wound. The bullet entered into his brain, and it did not exit. It was still there. So that's why one of the reasons why the autopsy had to be so messed up. So let's talk really very briefly about the autopsy first.
Do you want to scroll down? Is it?
Yeah, it's on page. It's on your page 5.
5.
It's in the table of contents, so it's further up.
So you want to go to chapter 5, the table of contents. This?
Yes.
Okay.
At chapter 5, you'll see the autopsy there. The bottom of the page there. Okay. First of all, this autopsy really tells us a lot about the evidence of cover-up. It really has a lot. First of all, it was under A. It was rescheduled. 3 separate authorities all claimed responsibility for rescheduling the autopsy. He was found on a Tuesday afternoon. He was supposed to have his autopsy on a Thursday morning. Instead, it was moved to the very next day. And again, 3 authorities each claimed, without having spoken to anyone else, that they had changed it. So they can't get their story straight. The next under B there, failure of investigators to attend. Well, there's a requirement that the investigating officers, this is a U.S. Park Police requirement, also Fairfax County Office of Medical Examiner requirement, that the investigating officers attend. They didn't, but other officers did. The entrance wound evidence removed. That's a big one. Before the police officers got to the autopsy to witness it, it was essentially over. Dr. Beyer this is the autopsy doctor. Dr. Beyer had removed the evidence, the official evidence of the mouth entrance wound. He removed it. It was gone. So that's essentially the vast majority of the autopsy was over by the time the police get there. Next thing, under D, refusal to identify autopsy assistant. And by the way, all of this is proven. It's all quoted from federal investigative records. This entire 540 pages quotes 184 exhibits, again, proving each and every point that Kavanaugh wrote in his report is a lie. The next one, refusal to identify autopsy assistant. The police asked him, asked Dr. Byer, who's helping you? He refused to identify him, so you don't need his name. They wouldn't tell the police who was conducting the autopsy. The caliber of the next one, caliber of weapon unknown. The only thing that Dr. Byer knew was that a nondescript weapon was found in close proximity to the body. It was from his testimony. He doesn't even know what type of weapon it was or that it was allegedly found in his hand. And the next one, lab report contradicts the existence of the official entrance wound. Now, this is very important. In our review, it was 73 people working 17 months full time. I found a FBI report that talked about a previous report from the Virginia Medical Examiner's Office from their laboratory, and it excused the absence of gunpowder on these slides that Dr. Byer had sent to his own laboratory. So Dr. Byer, when he took out, of course, the alleged entrance wound in the soft palate, and what he said was he could see the gunpowder. It was grossly present. In other words, you could see it with the naked eye. So he took some slides and he sent it to his own laboratory, and then we see this FBI lab report saying that the reason that there was no gunpowder on these slides, and the reason that it was because it was not prepared in a way that is conducive to retaining unconsumed gunpowder particles. In other words, it just vanished. Now, this finding or report of the soft palate having gunpowder on it was really the cornerstone of all of these medical experts that were subsequently hired. They harped over and over again, how could this possibly have happened? He had gunpowder on his soft palate. Well, he didn't. It's just a lie. The next one is FBI was apprised of the preliminary results of no exit wound. We found that, or actually Alan Favish found that in a FOIA Freedom of Information Act lawsuit soon after the release of the Starr report. And what it says is the FBI was apprised the preliminary report showed no exit wound. There was no exit wound, as we'll talk about later. The next thing, x-rays vanished. We talked a little bit about that already. They changed their story. First, it was the x-ray machine was working. It wasn't working. It got readable x-rays. It didn't get readable x-rays. They didn't take any x-rays was another story because it was broken. Well, it wasn't broken, and the x-rays turned out fine, as we saw. There's no official estimate of time of death. Why is that, I wonder? Well, because they just want to stay away from that because, of course, his car and also his car keys were not in the park. And then next thing, conflicting evidence of bullet trajectory. Well, one of the reports says that he has his posterior orthotics. We'll show where that is in the head. And then another report says, and Dr. Byer says it was in his soft palate. They both can't be true. It's just conflicting. So in any event, that's the sort of thing we're talking about. Now, if we have time, when we get through the majority of this, William, if you want to ask me any questions, you could pick any aspect of this case, and I will prove to you, showing the federal and your viewers, showing the federal government records that it's a lie. Okay. Now let's go down, if you go down to page 9, that photograph of the payphone, we're going to talk about that. Yeah. Now, remember I said that the reason that this case is just so incredibly screwed up by way of the cover-up is that the body was not ready for its discovery when the official 911 when the 911 call went in to the police. It wasn't ready. His car wasn't there. His car keys weren't there. His gun wasn't there. The neck wound had not been covered up. It was just a mess. And there's a sign, you might have seen it when you were watching the video. When you pull into Fort Marcy Park, there's a sign that says Fort Marcy Park closed at dark. So obviously, What the idea was, they get it all ready for its discovery. At dark, the park police would drive in there and find a car, take a walk through the park and find it and report it. At that time, they would have the body ready for its official discovery, but not when it happened. And the reason I wanted to go through this is, according to Kavanaugh's report, this guy named C.W., Dale Kyle, discovered the body. Now, let's talk a little bit about how we know that's a lie. Because C.W. or Dale Kyle, this is his claim. He went into Fort Marcy Park to urinate. He got out of his van, his white van, took his shirt off, walked 700 feet up into the park, not the first large tree as Patrick Knowlton did. It's just not true. And then saw Vince Foster's body and saw that he did not have a weapon in his hand, and he thought that Kyle thought that he had been hit in the head, but he was clearly dead. So according to Kyle, he walked back to his van, and he noticed some items in this brown Honda, this older Honda, which the government and Kavanaugh wants you to think is Vince Foster's car. But we know from where he was standing, there's no way he could have seen these items in the car. He just couldn't have done it. He was 25 feet away at an elevated position. He could not have seen this. So then he says he got in his van and drove to the nearest payphone about a mile down the road at the Park Service maintenance facility. So he drove in, but he decided not to call the police himself. Instead, he told two Park Service workers about the dead body. And one of the reasons that he did not call the police, he says, is because he couldn't see any payphones. Well, this is the photograph of the payphones when you drive in to the park. You cannot miss it. Payphones right here. So then he says he talked to these two park maintenance workers, and then he drove away. And one of the reasons he didn't report it himself, so he says, is because he didn't want to end up like that guy he found. Now that makes absolutely no sense. You discover a dead body, you call it in, and they're going to kill you because of it. It's just ludicrous. So in any event, the Fisk report, which was the first or second layer of this FBI cover-up, said that they talked to him and he passed the test of veracity because because they compared what he had to say with these two park maintenance workers. Well, and this is the Fisk report. It says that they, after a detailed study, well, we did a detailed study, and of the three reporting people, Kyle and the two maintenance workers, not one of them said anything that was the same as the other. They could not. Their stories are so screwed up. One, he was driving a white van. One, he was driving a dark van, a dark colored van. One of them says Virginia tags. One of them said Maryland tags. One of them said estimated his height because the other one said, well, he couldn't estimate his height because he never got out of the truck.
And you can hear me?
Yes, I hear you, Hugh.
Well, I can't hear anything.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay. Sorry, continue, John.
Well, so this guy Kyle says that he thought, he said there was no gun. He thought the guy had been hit with the head. Well, the park maintenance in this ginned up transcript that is a big lie. The park maintenance worker calls up the transcript that we got in a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit and said, well, it looks like the man's been shot. Well, he didn't get that information from Dale Kyle, so that's just not true. And he also, the first thing, he picked up the phone to call about a dead body, and the first thing he reports is a car accident on the Parkway, a fender bender. Well, Dale Kyle didn't say, after this detailed discussion, he didn't say anything about a car accident. The car accident was between Fort Marcy Park and this maintenance facility. He wouldn't have known the guy who called it in, Stowe, the maintenance worker, he wouldn't have known about it unless somebody had told him. And according to all accounts, he was not told. So, this guy, Dale Kyle, he didn't come forward for 8 months. 8 months later, when the FBI was doing its second death investigation, he allegedly came forward. Well, as I said, this case is so screwed up because the body wasn't ready for its discovery. And so whoever it was who did find that body, and Hugh might have something to add to this, he saw something he wasn't supposed to see. So they had to, lie about that. Now let's go on to the next page, if you don't mind, William. And actually, the page, one more page. You'll see this is the subpoena that Patrick received to testify before the Whitewater grand jury. You can see who signed it, Brett M. Kavanaugh, with his telephone number. Well, I got this case on a Friday. Patrick's harassment began on Thursday. It was Friday evening before I spoke with him. He was to testify on Wednesday. On Monday, I got in touch with the Office of Independent Counsel and called up Brett Kavanaugh. Got the telephone number off the subpoena and called him up and talked to him. And it was a fairly short conversation. He said he was going to cover the harassment in the grand jury testimony. And so that was the only conversation that I had with him. And you can see from the appendix, among other things, the court-ordered appendix, submitted on Patrick's behalf, he talks about how horribly Kavanaugh treated him, just horribly, just accused him of being they have this, the government has this lie about how it's a homosexual hangout, Fort Marcy Park, which it isn't. But they accused him, almost accused him, came right out and accused him of being a homosexual and being in the park cruising. It was just horrendous. And he also asked him a number of questions at the very end. And I accompanied Patrick through this grand jury testimony. He took 2 breaks, and both times he came out and said, "They are just trying to discredit me. They are trying to discredit me." So in any event, the last time he came out was when, according to Kavanaugh, he wanted to ask the grand jurors if they had some questions that they wanted to ask. So could you step out? Patrick stepped out. Told me about, again, I was being discredited or attempted to be discredited. And then he stepped back in, and Kavanaugh asked him a number of questions about this guy that he saw in the park. He said, "Did he talk to you? Did he threaten you?" And then he said, "Did he touch your genitals?" in the grand jury. That's what he asked Patrick Knowlton. And Patrick was just flabbergasted by this. Now, later on in correspondence, the Office of Independent Counsel, Kavanaugh, and John Bates, the Deputy Independent Counsel, said that this did not happen. He did not ask him this. So, but here we have on this, which is page 12, on November 13, 1995, memorandum by Hickman Ewing. He was a Deputy Independent Counsel in Little Rock, and to his file, and the subject is Chris Ruddy. And Chris Ruddy had called Hickman Ewing to talk to him about these questions because Patrick had told Chris Ruddy about it. And so this is a memorandum regarding a voicemail that Ewing received from Kavanaugh. He says, "Brett said that on the voicemail to me, I didn't ask him that. I did ask him about sexual advances by the other man in the park." Well, he's coming half clean. He did ask it. And why is he asking sexual questions about Patrick's 5-minute visit to the park? Now, that was the first time I talked to Kavanaugh was on that Monday. And then the next time I talked to him was the day after Patrick testified on November 2nd. And so this is, we've seen what Patrick had been going through for days now. On the day after he testified, had been treated this way. There was somebody who came into the building, and my explanation of what he was doing here in this building was either to scare Patrick or to kill him. We didn't know which. So I called up. By this time, I was a little upset. I was angry by this time. So I called up Kavanaugh again. I said, there was somebody came into this building, was either here to scare Patrick or to kill him, and I wanted a meeting with the FBI and the Office of Independent Counsel today. And that was at 3:30 p.m. And so Brett says, it's kind of silenced. He says, "Okay, how about 6 o'clock?" So fine. So at 6 o'clock, again, I didn't really know a lot about this cover-up. I really hadn't figured out what was going on. But in any event, I show up at the Office of Independent Counsel, and Deputy Independent Counsel John Bates answers the door, and he escorts me into a conference room. It's a fairly small conference room. So I'm sitting in the middle of the conference room. At the head on the right was and the far right was I can't finish the name. Let me back up here. I'm sitting at the conference table in the middle. Directly across from me, there are 5 people in there other than me. Directly across from me is this guy, Eric Lukenhoff, supervisory FBI agent. Now, to Lukenhoff's left, so to my right, was Deputy Independent Counsel John Bates. And then to the far left was a U.S. a DC Metropolitan Police Department, Jeff Green, Cold Case Squad. He was on my left. And right next to me on my left was Jim Clement, and he's a very interesting character. We'll talk about him a little bit later. And then just
hold on, are you saying Jim Clemente? Jim Clemente?
Yes.
Oh no, I didn't know that he was in that. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, yeah.
He's super interesting. I know a lot about him.
Oh yeah, Hugh has some interesting information about him. In any event, so Lukenhoff is directly across the table from me, and just to Lukenhoff's right and to my left is Brett Kavanaugh. So let me tell you what I told the group. So I'm doing most of my talking is to Lukenhoff, a little bit more to Bates during the course of this presentation. So what I did was I told them what happened. So let me read to you what Patrick wrote about what happened so that I can sort of adequately describe what it was that I told those people in that conference room on November 2nd, 1995. At about 3:30 p.m., Patrick went down to a lobby of his apartment building. As he exited his elevator, he noticed a man standing outside of the building. He walked towards the front door. Another tenant entered, and the man followed into the Patrick's building. As soon as he made eye contact with Patrick, he became startled and immediately turned around, walked out the door, and stood looking at a newspaper box to the left of the entrance to his back with Patrick. Patrick walked out back to with his back to his building. He took short steps side to side as if he was nervous. This is this guy. Patrick walked out the door, turned to the right, walked about 20 feet, looked back, and saw that the man was walking about 15 feet behind him. Patrick continued about another 80 feet to the corner. As he retrieved the newspaper from the newspaper box, he looked up and to his left and saw the man looking down, reaching into his bag with his right hand. The man looked up, made contact with Patrick, and quickly pulled his hand out of the bag and dropped the bag to his side. Now, I'm telling everybody in the room about this, and as I'm telling them, I'm looking around, I'm talking to a group of 6 other people, I'm looking around the room, looking at these people. And every time I looked at Kavanaugh, he was a mess. He was 29 years old, and he was a mess. He was distraught. He was written all over his face. He was like, like it was just really a mess. And so my glances looking around the room, I tried not to make it too obvious, but I kept on looking at him more than anyone else because I just wanted to see his reaction to what I was saying, and he was a mess. Now, let me read on. Seconds after Patrick started walking towards the building, they walked past each other. About 10 feet they passed. Patrick looked behind him and saw the man standing on the corner looking back at Patrick. Patrick then turned and walked toward the man. The man turned and ran. He ran diagonally across 24th Street, across K Street, and onto Washington Circle. Now, this is what Patrick says about his reaction to this encounter. As the man reached into his bag, I was scared. I thought he was reaching for a gun. Then the fear turned into anger. I felt fed up and decided to confront the guy. I thought if the guy was going to shoot me, he better shoot me. When he ran away, the reality of being in danger sunk in, and the anger turned back to fear. So that was my. So as I'm telling this group, and I'm looking at Brett Kavanaugh. I didn't know this at the time, but Brett had replaced U.S. Attorney Miguel Rodriguez because Rodriguez was not going to go along with the cover-up. So those are that was my meeting with Brett Kavanaugh. If you could go to the next page, or the next page down to page 15, versus child abduction unit. There we go. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's Jim Clemente right there. Oh man, I didn't know.
Yeah, there he
I
is.
didn't know he was involved. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's Jim Clemente's official website states, for over a decade, he was an FBI profiler investigating serial, violent, and sexual crimes. He is an internationally recognized expert in the field of child sexual victimization, sexual homicide, and child abduction. Now, why was he assigned to this case? And then Hugh found this cover page that's above that on the page, Child Abduction and Serial Killer Unit of the FBI. Questions, and the name of this document, that is the author of the document, and then the name of the document is Questions for a Suicide Expert, Vincent Foster, Death Investigation.
Wow.
Now, what is this doing in this file? Wouldn't it be nice to? Would you like to see what was what was
What were they thinking? How to get involved? Just to interrupt, John, I published a book about the West Memphis Three, and Clemente's on this kind of true crime podcast that did a lousy job. And one of his cohorts on this podcast just called me a book peddler, just called me the worst stuff. It was unbelievable. But their version of it's a whole nother story than this, but these people couldn't get it right, man. They just couldn't even get close. But yeah, so anyway, I have kind of an oblique connection to Clemente.
Yeah, both Patrick and I had quite a bit of contact with Clemente. He was the one assigned to the case, and I talked to him a number of times, and Patrick talked to him a number of times without me present also. I'll look at the next page, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. This one, right?
Now this is a telecopy cover sheet, and it's by Brett Kavanaugh. And it's to Hick Ewing, Deputy Independent Counsel in Little Rock, Hick Ewing, and a number of pages 3. And it says, and so here in all caps, Kavanaugh wrote, "We have underlined big problems with Miguel's leaks." Now what he's talking about is Miguel calling these journalists, trying to get the word out about a murder cover-up that Kavanaugh is covering up. I was at I was having lunch. Actually, I was on the phone. There was a group of journalists having lunch with a friend of mine about 6 months ago, and I told them all about this. And I told them what Miguel said. Miguel Rodriguez was talking about how there was a cover up and he couldn't get the word out. He talked to over 100 journalists, and with a couple of journalists at the table. One of them said, "Well, has this been verified?" I said, "Well, why don't you verify it? You're a reporter. Go to the website and listen to him. It's on tape. We have him on tape saying this." And of course, I never heard from him or any other journalist who was at that table. I don't know if he went there or not.
And just for people who don't know, Miguel, during his whole investigation, Miguel was kind of like a straight shooter and kept having bouncing into problems with his investigation. Vince Foster and quit, left D.C. and is now literally became a transsexual and now is like Michelle Rodriguez, right?
That's correct. He had a sex change, and but he was a prosecutor before that. Before he in the Northern District of California, federal prosecutor, and he went back to that same position, federal prosecutor in the Northern District of California. Very, very capable person. Let's go to the next page. If you don't mind.
Nope.
Yeah. Now
look at that name, Kamala Harris. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, Kamala Harris. I underlined that one. This is an August 2018 letter that I hand delivered to the Judiciary Committee when they were having their hearings, whether or not to confirm Brett Kavanaugh as a Supreme Court justice. And let me just show this to you. It's a cover letter, which is 7 pages long, along with 80 pages attached to it. It's got the court-ordered appendix to Kavanaugh's report. It has Miguel Rodriguez's 30-page memorandum that he sent to, among others, Starr, and setting forth what happened to him when he had a meeting with Kavanaugh and other members of the Office of Independent Counsel, telling him about all these areas of cover-up. He says the police planted the weapon in his hand. He said that some of the park police officers who were in the park before the White House claims to have known that Vincent Foster had been found there, that these park police officers were members of the special unit of the U.S. Park Police, which is detailed to the White House. But what are they doing there before anyone find out? Another thing that Miguel Rodriguez, I mean, it's 30 pages. It's got a lot in there, all kinds of items of a cover-up. But one thing, and a few things that we didn't know, and one of them is that the first police officer on the scene, Kevin Fornshore, and we need to talk about him and his ridiculous story, had responded to the park before the 911 call went in. Now that's kind of interesting, I thought. In any event, in this letter, I say to them, to the Judiciary Committee, to Kamala Harris and Orrin Hatch and all the rest of them, I say that I'm asking them to include these 80 pages in the congressional record. But then I point out, I know you're not going to do it. But this is just for posterity's sake, so that I want to make sure that when this becomes public, that I want to be able to tell people that you knew all about it. So I didn't ask them to do anything. All I asked them was to tell me to acknowledge receipt. I got nothing, of course, nothing. They did not acknowledge receipt. They don't want to know. I wonder how many of these people on the Judiciary Committee has gone to FBIcoverup.com and watched that video that we were just watching, or looked at this document detailing evidence of a cover-up on virtually every single aspect of this case. I would really like to know that. Maybe someday, either my kids or grandkids will find out about it, but we don't know. Let's turn to the next page, if you don't mind. Now, this is Fort Marcy Park, this map. And what we did was we went, or Patrick and Hugh, it was really quite incredible what they did. They traced everybody's movements in the park from the time that they arrived until the body was taken out of the park. And so what we did here was we did it minute by minute. And you see at the top here, it says Fort Marcy Park at 6:26 p.m. And this is the time when U.S. Park Police Sergeant Robert Edwards showed up, went to the body. He met with Franz Firstel, who was the only other officer at the body at that time, took Firstel's Polaroid photographs and ordered Firstel away from the body back to the park. Now look at as you'll see from that triangular shape, those are berms, and you can see at the bottom is the parking lot. Now from the parking lot to when you can see all the way at the top there, the little X that says body, you can't see the body. It's way back behind some woods.
Right. Just for people who don't know, Fort Marcy got its name as a Civil War fort. It was built out of berms and large trunks of trees, and you can still see that today. And I think they even have a couple old, like, military artillery pieces there, or used to. So it definitely has that feel. And so what you have to think, if Vince Foster killed himself, he parked in that parking lot with no car, but he walked all the way through the park, all the way back to the other end of the park, and then crossed over the berm, and then supposedly shot himself. So it's in the remotest part of the park, which you can actually enter from the back. I think my understanding is there's like a service road back there.
You can. Of course, Kavanaugh didn't say anything about the back entrance in his report, but yeah, you can. In any event, back to this map and this minute by minute. Again, we have Robert Edwards at the body site, and Franz Firstel, so U.S. Park Police officer, took a couple of Polaroid photographs. Edwards took his photographs, said, go back to the parking lot. So Edwards is alone at the body. Now, if we go to the next page. Yeah, that one. Edwards had been alone with the body for 15 minutes. And during that time, he replaced the semi-automatic pistol that had been in Mr. Foster's hand, which had been placed there by U.S. Park Police Officer Kevin Fornchel, and he placed an old, untraceable 1913 revolver in his hand, loaded with high-velocity ammunition. Then he turned, we'll talk about this a little bit later, he turned the head to the left, and blood had accumulated in Foster's mouth. Remember, he's shot in the neck, and he had the blood come over from the mouth to drain over the bullet wound in his neck to try and conceal the existence of the bullet wound in his neck. So we'll talk about that. We've got some more diagrams about exactly how he did that a little bit later.
John, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I mean, you've been doing great without me so far, so I've just been listening. But with this particular page here, we made a mistake on this page. This is that book Tort document is 510 pages, and there's bound to be a mistake somewhere. And when we did this was the best information we had at the time. But when we got Miguel's memo that we found at the archives, that 30-page memo that you mentioned, that you attached to the Judiciary Committee, we gave them that document. In that 30-page memo, Miguel said that the gun was brought to the scene by Rolla, Braun, and Simonello, and that they brought that gun up to the body and placed the gun in the hand and retook the photographs. And they moved the body, and this is Miguel said this on tape. We have on tape. He said they moved the body. It was on the berm, with at a 45-degree angle with the feet down, the head up, and they pulled it up onto level ground. That's when more blood flowed. That's what happened. It wasn't Edwards alone who replaced the gun and moved the head. We thought that at the time. We were close, but I don't think we could even hardly believe that a whole group of Park Police officers did it together. But in fact, they did. And there was Rolla was there, Braun was there, Simonello was there, and I think Edwards and maybe perhaps even Dr. Hout. Miguel said that on the audio tape to Reed Irvine. He said that Hout was there and saw the body in two positions. So there was a group of people. It was a community effort to replace that gun, which you were correct. They replaced the gun, but they were all there. And when we wrote this one page, this was not exactly correct here, but it was the best we had at the time. It's pretty close, but we were right that the police put the gun in the hand. We just didn't know how many of them participated. Is that okay if I add that?
Sure, it's okay if you add that. Again, I will continue to disagree with Miguel. I know Miguel had a grand jury and he had testimony, but we have these records. I think we're right, but we could be wrong anyway. The point is that the police replaced the gun.
Exactly. We know that much, and that's clear.
Yeah, that's clear. So let's go to the next page. Now, this is the way Kavanaugh wrote this report. We have these topics here at this heading here: the wound, we talked about a little bit, the gunshot residue, that is smoke or consumed and unconsumed gunpowder particles, the gun, blood, and photographic evidence. So what Kavanaugh did was he had a lot of information in here, but he spread it all out. So look at the photographic evidence. It's in two different places. He doesn't discuss all this stuff in a photograph. I mean, in the photograph section of his report, he spreads it all out, so it's much more difficult to find. So, but it's doable. We went through and we got it, and that's what this is the way that we. This is what we came up with. This stuff is spread out and it's hidden in the 114-page report. A lot of it's left out, as we'll see. But what isn't left out is hidden by his putting it in footnotes throughout his 114-page report. So let's look at the next page. Now, this is a testimony of Richard Arthur. He was one of the first paramedics to view the body, and he's talking about this neck wound. Another thing that Rodriguez concluded in his 30-page memorandum was that 4 fire and rescue department workers all said that they saw the bullet wound in Mr. Foster's neck, but we didn't know that at the time. But here's what we did know. We know that Richard Arthur, we interviewed him. Patrick and Hugh and I, we all went to go visit with him. We were tailed by some FBI agents, but that's another story. So in any event, here's Richard Arthur's testimony. Let me ask you this. If I told you that there was no gunshot wound in the neck, would that change your view as to whether or not it was suicide? Now, he's under oath. His answer, no. What I saw was what I saw. I saw blood all over the right side of the neck from here down, all over the shoulder. And I saw what appeared to be a small gunshot wound here near the jawline. Fine. Whether the coroner's report says that or not, fine. I know what I saw. There was a bullet wound. Let's go to the next page, if you don't mind.
Nope.
Now, all of these pages that we're talking about are all excerpts. They're all taken from this 540-page report using 184 federal government investigative records. We didn't use our own records. We used the federal government records to prove their own cover-up. So here on page, this following page, we're talking about, this is in the autopsy section. This is what Kavanaugh wrote. Officer Morissette's report. Officer Morissette had attended the autopsy. Report on the autopsy state, and he's quoted, after briefing him with the available evidence surrounding the crime scene of the victim, he started the autopsy on the victim. Well, yeah, I don't know why Officer Morissette wrote that. Maybe he was told to write that. But this is what I just read you was what Kavanaugh wrote. The very next sentence in Morissette's report says, prior to our arrival, the victim's tongue had been removed as well as parts of the soft tissue from the palate. The evidence of the official entrance room area had been removed by the time they got there. And also we know from other reports, by the time they got there, Mr. Foster had a coat hanger showing the trajectory through his head, showing the trajectory of the bullet. So essentially, it was over by the time the police got there. But you wouldn't know that from Kavanaugh. Let's go on to the next page. Now this is the as you can see, it's a graphic of the bullet trajectory. And here's the bullet trajectory. The official bullet trajectory is the one that's in that dotted line. Well, behind you'll see what's labeled there. One is the soft palate. We talked about this a little bit earlier, and this is oropharynx. The oropharynx is not in the same area as the soft palate. So what did Kavanaugh do? Instead of choosing between the soft palate and the oropharynx, he put it in his report, it was both. So it wasn't both. Now let's go on to the next page. Now, we had an exemplar weapon. I can't find it, but we got a weapon. And we showed how it was that these powder debris, the smoke debris, consumed and unconsumed gunpowder got on Foster's hands, and the position his hands had to have been in when it happened. And the way that we did that was we know the length of the description of where the gunpowder was, and so we know that it came from the barrel cylinder gap. Now, a barrel spins around, of course, and it's got two areas where it's open, one in the back and one in the front. The one in the front puts out a lot more smoke and unconsumed and consumed gunpowder. Debris comes out of the front. So, and then at the bottom of this page, you'll see that we have Dr. Byers' drawings of the gunshot residue on his hands. So let's go to the very next page. See, there's another photo, this is our drawing of where he described the gunshot. Let's go to the next page.
Right. GSR is gunshot residue, right?
Yeah, yes, This is how Vincent Foster's hands were when the weapon was fired. He was pushing it away from him. And we know that because we got the exemplar weapon, and we had what I showed you before. We put these little pieces of glass where the gunshot residue would have been. So we know where his hands were when the weapon was fired. Now, according to the official version, Vincent Foster would have had, he wouldn't pull the trigger. He would have his hands like that, so he would have to have pushed it with his thumb. He wouldn't pull the trigger, he'd push it. Very unusual. And given the powder burns on his hand, the powder debris on his hands, the gunshot residue, we know that the thumb was too far away to even push the trigger. It could not have happened. It's not unusual, not unlikely. It's impossible. It could not have happened. Now, let me tell you one kind of brief story about when accuracy meeting and Reed Irvine were putting on a symposium, and it was in a hotel in Washington. It was a very large room. There was over 100 people. There were really quite a few people, and Bill O'Reilly was on the panel, and so he gave some speech about Vincent Foster, and he said, among other things, he said, well, you know, I'd report on it if you had a smoking gun. So at the question period, I went up there, and it's on C-SPAN. You can see it on C-SPAN. I held this up, and I said the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit had just released this just 6 weeks ago, 6 weeks after the release, and I went through this. It was not unusual. It was not unlikely. It would have been impossible for the smoke coming out of the gun. So I said, well, Mr. O'Reilly, is that would that fit your definition? Or I assume that fits your definition of a smoking gun. And I said, and so the crowd was behind me; they were with me, so he, gave sort of a non-answer. I said, well, here's the thing: I'll give you a copy of it. Will you read it? He said, I'll look at it. He's not going to read this, Bill O'Reilly. He'll look at it.
That's the common theme in this whole situation: is the willful blindness, the willful, deliberate ignorance of facts around the case. Would you agree with that, John?
Absolutely. And let me tell you a little bit about the independent counsel statute before Congress decided to kill it or not renew it. All you have to do, you don't have to be a journalist. You could be anyone, any citizen calls up the Office of Independent Counsel or the clerk's office at the court and gives your name and address. And when that report comes out, you get a copy of it. You don't have to pay for it. All you have to do is give your name and address. When it comes out, they'll mail it to you. So, of course, throughout the country, every news organization put their name on that list. They all got it. Not one of them reported that evidence of a murder cover-up was ordered to be attached to the Office of the Independent. It was news suppression on a grand scale. It really, really was something. Anyway, let's go on to the next page. You have, the next page.
John, where can people get this PDF document? Is this available to the public, or is this some internal document that you have?
FBIcoverup.com.
So it's on there. It's on your website somewhere. Okay.
It's on there. It's there, and it's 540 pages. But what we did was we took 160 pages and put a kind of it took out a lot of the minutiae. There's a lot of
at the bottom.
Yeah, it's on the homepage.
So it's on the homepage, right? Is that what you said?
Go to the homepage. Scroll all the way down to the bottom.
And that's it right here.
On the left hand, on the
that's it. Okay, so people can find it here. Let me put that up there. Somebody asked. Okay, sorry to interrupt. Please.
So that's right. We also have two versions of it. If they don't want to read the 540 pages,
right. So if they're really enterprising, they can read the 540 page version.
Right, or they can read the 160 pages, the excerpts that I took out of it and collected and put them together. But even if they have the 540 page, almost every chapter has a summary at the beginning of the evidence. So you can get through it pretty quickly. You can just read the summary and then read a couple of chapters that don't have summaries, and you'll have kind of all of the information.
I mean, it is pretty incredible. You've been working on this case almost a quarter century. Like, it's really, I mean,
well, really I was full-time on this case for about 7 years, almost full-time, certainly full-time for the first 4 years, and maybe part-time for 3 years. But since then, I have not, I'm not working on it, with the exception of every once in a while, I'll let the powers that be, provide them with the evidence and see if anybody wants to. It's like it's a weapon sitting here just to be picked up, and nobody's picked it up yet, but I'm not going to give up. I'm not giving up. So anyway,
Well, before you could go on and on with the evidence, but what I think is important, and you always say it so well, is why this is important and why it matters in relation to our government and to our news media and our country. Why should people care about this?
Well, I think, that is
that's the big issue.
That is a big issue, and I probably should have highlighted that at the beginning. But we're going through the evidence because I don't want anybody to watch this and say, "Well, he didn't prove it." I'm proving murder, cover-up, Kavanaugh right here and now. That's why I insisted on having a long interview, because I don't want to just come in and tell people about the murder cover-up. I want to prove it to them. But back to your question, Hugh, I think that's a good one. I think we should talk about that now. Well, let's just think, suppose the news media had done what they were supposed to have done and didn't suppress the evidence. What would that mean? Well, for one thing, we wouldn't have had Bill Clinton the second term. We just wouldn't have. There wouldn't have been a murder. He wouldn't have won re-election. He might have even resigned. Who knows? But he wouldn't. So they're taking away our history. Now, if Bill Clinton hadn't had a second term, Hillary Clinton wouldn't be the nominee. And if Hillary Clinton hadn't been the nominee, we wouldn't have Donald Trump. Now, so they're taking away our history from us. This is history. These journalists are getting paid big money to look the other way when history is happening in front of them. So another reason, maybe even more sort of broad, more important reason as to why this matters, is because the experiment of our founding fathers was to have, as I said in the video, is to have one branch of government exercise jurisdiction over another. And as I said, they're not doing that. What they're doing is they're not pursuing different interests. They're all pursuing the same interest, and that is credibility. Now, why do you think that nobody is going, or the news media didn't report about this agenda, but I sort of kept this murder cover-up from the American people for all these years? Well, because they joined in. It was 4 years of them acting like a public relations. Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable how they did. And it was, again, the longest sustained press leak in U.S. history. And it was live propaganda after propaganda after propaganda. I mean, it's just, so that's why we should care about this, is because the experiment of our founding fathers is an issue here.
Right. It's about the third. It's about the judiciary and the fourth estate. It's about how accurate these people are and what their attachments are to political parties. It's a current issue right now. So it goes back to Vince Foster probably earlier than that. A lot of these people are, I mean, you mentioned Isikoff and some of these other characters. They're just to me, they're not independent journalists.
No, they're not. Well, it tells us that we cannot trust our news media. We cannot trust the people that we get our information from. We cannot trust them, even when the cover-up is obvious. We can't trust the news media. We can't trust the Justice Department to do oversight and to do proper investigations. We can't trust the Congress to do oversight. We can't trust the government or the news media in this country at all. Not at all.
Look at the issue of vote fraud. I mean, it's obvious vote fraud, and the Department of Justice just ignored it. So these aren't the first events, and this is just one. And sadly, the Vince Foster case, to me, is just one in a long line of abuses of power. So it's really sad. It's really kind of a sad case and to me, he was probably one of the good guys, probably like Miguel Rodriguez, probably trying to do the right thing as an attorney. and just got crushed by this huge system and had to leave. All the good, I mean, and Kavanaugh just went along with, to me, he was just another person who was be very comfortable within the system and doing what he's told, and it paid off for him over the long term, I would say.
I wasn't
quite the payoff.
Did you guys mention David Martin's book, The Murder of Vincent Foster?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
we have. Yeah, we did it, but I did briefly mention at the intro that you and I did an interview about that book,
Right.
so people can go back and
Yeah,
do
that's
that.
a good. That's the latest thing that's been written on the case. That's probably the best book on the case. Is the Murder of Vincent Foster by David Martin.
And you guys were all there from the beginning, all there, right there, 93, 94, 95, all DC. I mean,
Well,
Dave
Martin
Martin
was
went
the
by
first.
DC Dave, and I used to read him when I was in DC. What, 95 to
Dave
90.
Martin was the first. William, he went to college with Foster, and from the very beginning, he was picking apart the news reports, and that didn't make sense to him what the news reports said. I came in a year later, in 1994. I guess the first day after, I was a little puzzled. I wondered who found the body, because the newspaper said it was an anonymous passerby, and that didn't make sense to me. But eventually I found out that it was the two park maintenance workers that found the body, and that's not the official story. But so I came in a year later, and I think, John, you came in 95 when Patrick was harassed. Is that right?
October 27, 1995. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it? So, yeah. So
yeah,
it's just,
here's The Murder of Vince Foster by David Martin, and of information in it. And also, another thing that it has in it that a lot of people don't know is it really outs Christopher Ruddy, who is now the CEO of Newsmax. We kind of wonder how he got the money for that. Well, I think we kind of maybe have a pretty good idea. But you put yourself in the position of the bad guys, the Justice Department. What are you going to do? There's not much by way of internet back in 93 through 95, and they certainly had their their propaganda arm, the news media en masse, but there was still a lot of information out there that people had questions about. There was still something fishy. So what would you do if you were the bad guys? What you would do is you would get a journalist to lead the parade and fumble at the goal line, and that's exactly what Christopher Ruddy did. His book, The Strange Death of Vincent Foster, fits together with Kavanaugh's report, which is right here, like a glove. It fits just like this. It's like written together. And Christopher Ruddy, I was sticking up for him even when he was bad-mouthing me, thinking that he was just paranoid. But he told Hugh to stay away from me. And to stay away from Patrick.
Yeah, but sorry to interrupt, but wasn't Ruddy having meetings with Sessions or something like that?
Yes,
he was. Literally had
I used
some
to
type
drive
of
him
connection
to Sessions' house.
to the very top of the FBI, who suspiciously gets into power the day after Foster died, right?
Oh, he was gone the day before Foster died.
The day before, sorry.
Right, but when Ruddy used to stay at my house, and he would ask me to drive him over to Sessions' house. He told me that he was going to meet with Sessions' wife, Alice. He said she was interested in the case, but I no longer believe that.
Right. Yeah.
Ruddy he had me fooled. My wife wasn't fooled, though. She told me she didn't like his face right out of the gate. And I said, well, you don't know the guy. How can you say you don't like him? She said, I don't trust him. He has a bad face. And yeah, I'd learned one thing out of this case. You better listen to your wife when she tells you somebody's got a bad face.
Yeah, well, Ken Starr went on he was the defense attorney for Epstein. So Starr, his career is not, it's not that clean, I would say, in my opinion. We're kind of almost at 2 hours, guys. I think you should both kind of, if you can, John, just have some concluding statements, promote your website, where can people reach out to you, etc. I think we could probably do another 2 hours just on the evidence alone. There's just so much evidence of just contradictions and problems with the official record.
Yeah, I'll try and wrap it up. You can go to FBICoverup.com. Everything is at that website, thanks to Hugh, who's been putting it up. And also you can contact me through my website. It's John H. Clarke, CLARKE, law.com. But before I leave, I want to talk a little bit about Ken Starr. First off, I want to say that there are only 2 books of the, 24 or more books that have been written that include the Vince Foster death in it. There are only 2. One of them is The Secret Life of Bill Clinton. About a third of the book is devoted. That's by Ambrose Evans Pritchard, who we talked about. And also the other one is The Murder of Vince Foster. Those are the only 2 books that are worth reading. Of course, we encourage you to read the appendix that we had. But let me just continue on. Let me just say a couple of words about Ken Starr.
Okay.
Ken Starr, I have another book here, Violated, Exposing Rape at Baylor University and Med College Football Sexual Assault Crisis. Well, Ken Starr was the chancellor during this. And each one of these tabs is something that reflects badly on Ken Starr. But the authors, 2 authors, they did a great job, but their conclusion was they didn't know if Ken Starr knew about that, but if he didn't, he should have. So doesn't that sound kind of familiar? It does to me. But in Starr's, in the Foster case, we have this 30-page memorandum that's on the website that Starr received, talking about all these different aspects of a cover-up that was written by Miguel Rodriguez. So he's not gonna, he's not gonna skate by like he did at the rape crisis at Baylor University. Now let me read you just what Ambrose Evans Pritchard in this book, The Secret Life of Bill Clinton, had written about Ken Starr. He will never confront, he says, one thing can be predicted without absolute certainty. He will never confront the U.S. Justice Department, the FBI, and the institutions of permanent government in Washington. His whole career has been built on networking by ingratiating himself. His natural loyalties lie with the politico-legal fraternity that covered up the Foster case in the first place. One more paragraph. Pontius Pilate of the Potomac is how Starr is described in a blistering denunciation by James Davidson, the editor of the newsletter Strategic Investment. Starr will fade, quoting, Starr will fade, but he will not be forgotten. Historians will certainly have something to say about him when the decline and fall of the United States is written. Starr will merit a chapter. He will be seen as a weak, temporizing man who lacked the force of character to confront a corrupt system. He's inside inside the Beltway mentality. No more Watergates. If it's really makes the government and the news media and the Congress look bad, then we need to stay away from. That's their sort of the inside the Beltway mentality. Truth be damned.
Gotcha. And that's a great way to end it, John. This is your website right here. So if people want to reach out to you, ask you any additional questions, where they can read all your material that you've compiled over a quarter century, they could find it there. Hugh, would you like to finish up? You want to promote your book that John just promoted?
I like people to come to the website, FBIcoverup.com. There's a number of tabs across the top. There's a lot of documents there, all the documents you want to find. But there's also some good stuff on the press. There's a whole section on the press. And if you go in at the top along the tabs there's one called Inside Stories. And if you click that, there's a whole bunch of postage stamp size things there. You see that FBI document that had to do with the sexual stuff, sexual child abduction. There's a whole series of stuff on Christopher Ruddy. And the role of the press is pretty heavily covered in the back here. But that's really the key to the case.
Sorry to interrupt, but I also interviewed Dean Arnold about this book as well.
Oh, yeah, Dean's a good guy, yes. That's a good book. And we put that one up there. Hey, thanks for having us again, William. It was a pleasure.
Well, I'll have to have you back. We'll do it again and take more time and get everything ready in a much better. I think that there's just a lot more to talk about. I think we can go through the case in greater detail. Maybe we'll have a part 2 and really kind of cover some stuff that we didn't cover today. But thank you so much for your time again. It's John H. Clarke and Hugh Turley, who was the author of The Murder of Vince Foster with DC Dave, or Dave Martin. Thank you so much for your time. Stay there, guys. I'm going to end the broadcast.
Thank you, William.